Hey guys, so today we are finally going to be doing a whole video on Paranormal Activity. I've done a handful of reviews, I think, on the last two, and I've briefly talked about the franchise here and there. But today we're doing a ranking video where I'm going to tell you my ranking from worst to best of all the Paranormal Activity movies. I'm really excited for this video specifically because it's actually a collab with Emma from Spooky Astronauts. We are both going to be ranking the Paranormal Activity movies. Definitely check out her video. I know from what she told me, our tastes are pretty different, so you're gonna get two different rankings of these movies, and if you disagree with mine, maybe you should check out hers, because I feel like mine's a little controversial, but I just know that we kind of have different tastes in the Paranormal Activity movies, so definitely go check out her video. Also, I want to thank NordVPN for sponsoring this video. VPNs are super helpful these days to prevent hacking and give added online security, even on your phone, which is super, super important. One of the biggest selling points for me to personally have NordVPN is that you can actually change your country's location, and so your streaming services will change accordingly. So if you live in the United States and you change it to Canada, you're able to watch Paranormal Activity 2 through 4 on there because those are not on US Netflix. And this goes for all the streaming sites as well. Your streaming sites will match whatever country's location you select on the VPN service. It is amazing. It updates it right away on your computer. It is so cool. NordVPN offers a 30-day money-back guarantee and actually comes with a built-in ad blocker when you install it into your internet browser. It prevents your data from being logged and has double data encryption, so you are super anonymous when you're using the internet. They have a special Black Friday deal going on right now that if you purchase a 2-year plan, which is already 68% off, you will get 4 months of NordVPN for free. So make sure to go to the link in my description and use my code PossessedbyHorror. Okay, so I want to say that before we rank the Paranormal Activity movies, my opinion on them has slightly changed since rewatching them. I decided to sit down and have a marathon of all of the Paranormal Activity movies specifically for this video, and when you watch them back to back like this, you see just how repetitive the franchise really is. They do reuse a lot of the scares in almost all of the movies. They obviously, some of these movies are very different from one another, and we'll get to those, but typically they are reusing scares and they are recycling like whole scenes, in my opinion. And I think it's obvious that people know that this franchise is actually repetitive, because how do you change it up that much while still maintaining the general theme of Paranormal Activity? But it honestly made me like the franchise just a little bit less. I still love this franchise, first off. I want to say that. I love this franchise. I think mostly it is the nostalgia and the way that I experienced these movies in the theater, and I think it is a super original franchise for its time and a very creative idea, and kind of introduced a new way to do found footage movies. So we're starting off with worst, like I said, and coming in last place is The Ghost Dimension. Now personally, the last two movies did feel a little bit like a cash grab to me. You know, they had the biggest budget with these two movies, and so they really came in with CG effects and everything like that, and I don't enjoy these movies as big budget movies, kind of. You'll see where I rank the marked ones. You might be surprised. The Ghost Dimension takes place in 2013. The chronological time of these movies are so confusing, and they do that in the last couple movies. It gets real confusing because there's time hopping and things. Oh, and probably spoilers for these movies, by the way. I should probably just give a warning. So the Ghost Dimension takes place in this rebuilt house that was built on the property of where Katie and Christy lived, and where their house burned down. And then there's a portal, a time portal to go to that house. This to me is hands down the worst in the franchise because it's so cheesy. Like I said, this I think is the one with the biggest budget out of all of them, and they really went ham on that CG. They actually in this one created a being instead of the original first four, I guess. Had more of a figure that you didn't really see much, which I think is a good thing with their budget. But in this one, they decided to create a being, and you see a ghost face sometimes. and it's just not good. There's like one scene that is actually kind of cool because the being is like these long black tendril things that look like tentacles, I don't know, it's kind of weird. There's a scene where it like drops from the ceiling and I thought it looked cool. That's like the only scene. The horror in this is not good. They do not do well with the pacing of this movie or building the suspense or horror elements, in my opinion. And this one just felt very ambitious to me because they had the biggest budget and they tried to kind of create a Hollywood style ghost haunted house demonic movie, and for me that just doesn't work with this franchise. I think this one strayed way too far from the originality and the simplicity of the original. The reason why the first one was so successful is because they knew how to make it scary given their budget, and another movie that does this really well is Blair Witch Project. They didn't show much, and a lot of people complain about that, but if you're the right type of person, this can honestly be really horrifying because then we fill in gaps with our imagination. We don't need to see everything in order for a movie to be scary, and I think we've been kind of conditioned with modern horror that we need to see everything in good lighting in order to be scared by it, and that's just, it shouldn't be the case. And I think the Ghost Dimension complicated the story about Christy and Katie way too much to where it made the first couple ones unbelievable because it's like they just forgot everything that happened in the Ghost Dimension. Like, it just made it so complicated and it did not need to be like that. And I think that the Ghost Dimension is what the first Paranormal Activity movie would have looked like if they went ahead and did the big budget remake that DreamWorks originally wanted to. I'm so glad they chose not to for the original because they wanted to do a bigger budget, hire, you know, more recognizable actors, and then put the original movie that we know and love as a special feature. So that's a big no, but I think Ghost Dimension is what that would have looked like probably. They would have wanted to create a monster in some way like they did in this one, and there's a reason why they don't do that in any of the other franchise movies. So yeah. Moving on, one of the controversial placements in this ranking is going to be Paranormal Activity 3 is my second worst. I know. I don't have much to say about this one because, first of all, this is the one that follows Katie and Christy in the 80s when they are children. And while it has its moments, I think it's a well done movie in the franchise. It is the most boring one to me, and the one I have always been least interested in. It's my least rewatched in the franchise. It is the one that I made notes on the last because I just don't have much to say about it, and I'm just not excited about this movie. I never have been. Also, when I rewatched all the movies, this is the only one that I struggled to really pay attention to, so I kind of like half-ass watched it. I'm sorry. I can't get into this. Is it anyone else? I don't know if it's like the time jump, like we go back in time to the 80s and it's just not as good. I don't know. I think some of the scares are actually pretty cool, like the bathroom scenes I really like, but other than that, I'm not a huge fan of Paranormal Activity 3, sorry. So the next one in my ranking is the marked ones, and honestly, this should be higher on my list. It really should, because this is such a gem, an underrated gem in this franchise, I think. This one is the most found footage out of all of the Paranormal Activities. It is the only one that only takes place on GoPro cameras and handheld. There's no security camera footage or anything like that. And technically this is a spin-off. They call it a spin-off than like a sequel. This apparently takes place right after number 4, I believe, in the timeline. It's not too important because there is a huge twist in the end, and this is the first time that they introduced the time jumps, which is why it's kind of higher in the worst category, because although it was shocking and I was like blown away in the theater, it makes it more confusing when it doesn't need to be. I think this one has some of the best horror elements in all of the franchise. It's one that doesn't feel too much like a Paranormal Activity movie, so if you didn't like the original first one or second one, or you've given the other ones a chance and you didn't like them, you might like the marked ones. Because like I said, there's no security camera, there's no like nighttime shots as far as like they put like night number 1, night number 2. They don't do that in this one. This is also the only one not to be released in October. It was actually released in January given the length of the movie. But obviously this one and the Ghost Dimension made the least amount in the box office. I think the hype had kind of died down. We've gotten 4 Paranormal Activity movies at this point, and I think people were kind of fizzling out of their love for the franchise and just weren't interested in the spin-offs. Now, another reason why this one feels different is because it did not take place in a upper class white household like all the other ones have, which personally I love. This takes place in a Latino community, and I think it adds so much to this story, and I love that they switched it up for this movie. I wish they did it more in other movies in this franchise, but I think it was a really good addition to this movie. Generally, this one's a really fun movie, one of the most rewatchable in the franchise in my opinion. And like I said, it should be higher on this list, except I have a deep love for Paranormal Activity 4. Again, this is going to be a controversial spot placement for this one. In fact, it almost was at number 2. I know. This is hands down probably the cheesiest in the original franchise, not counting the Ghost Dimension. If we're just looking at the first 4 Paranormal Activity movies, Paranormal Activity 4, definitely the cheesiest, but I have my reasons why I love this one so much. First of all, it's kind of a teen horror, right? And that's just something I gravitate towards. It follows a teen girl. This takes place where in the timeline? I think it goes 3, 2, 1, 4. So this takes place right after number 1. This definitely has a higher body count than the first 3, which I enjoy because there's more action going on. If you weren't a fan of the original because it didn't feel like much happens in it, then you'd probably enjoy the 4th one, but I say that lightly because it is a cheesy one in the series. It definitely has the worst jump scares out of all of the franchise. And yes, there are decent jump scares in this franchise, and I will get to that later in the list. So they did switch it up with this one as well and used webcams primarily. This one also has the Xbox Connect feature and like scares with that. So I think this was a really smart decision given it was the 4th Paranormal Activity movie and we wanted something unique and something different than just the security cameras or the like handheld that we got in the 3rd one, which again, I don't really care about, so whatever. This one felt a little bit like Unfriended in a way, and so if you're a fan of Unfriended, as cheesy as that movie is, I love Unfriended personally, you'd probably like this one as well. And this one is hands down the most rewatchable in the franchise for me personally, and this is the one that I have seen the most because there's something about it that I just really like, and I know it's controversial to rank it so high on this list, but it deserves that a 3rd place spot in my opinion. Coming in at number 2, Paranormal Activity 1, the original, the classic. Now, although this is the most uneventful Paranormal Activity movie with the lowest body count in all of the series, it's ranked really high for a reason, and I think a lot of people are gonna agree. There are so many endearing qualities about the first one and the original, and if you didn't watch it in theaters, I don't know if you will appreciate this movie as much. So they filmed this movie in 10 days only. They filmed it in Oren Peli's actual house. He spent 1 year redecorating his own home. They had a very, very small budget and basically no script. So a lot of this movie was improv, and it is the 2nd highest grossing film ever next to Blair Witch Project because of the budget, because obviously you have to take into consideration the very low budget and how much money it went on to make, which this one went on to make, I think, $193 million, and with a very small budget of like $10,000 or $15,000, I think it was. It obviously was a very high grossing movie, one of the highest. And this one, I think, created a new subgenre of the found footage subgenre, if that makes sense. It wasn't like Blair Witch Project or any other found footage movie that we had seen thus far. It was security cameras and the stillness of the camera, yet still being found footage. And if you still need convincing that this movie is genuinely really good, I recommend going onto IMDb and looking at the trivia, because I could browse that for hours. It is just so fascinating to me how they made this movie and how successful it really was. The thing about the original though, I will admit, it doesn't age well. Like I said, if you hadn't seen this in theaters when it first came out back in 2009, then you probably don't have an appreciation for this movie or even this franchise. I think watching it at home years later, if you're trying to get into it, it's not going to be that good in a home setting if you didn't already have that nostalgia for it or that enjoyment prior, especially comparing it to modern horror films now. Like, it's just not gonna do it for a lot of people, and I get it. It didn't do it for a lot of people back in the day either, so it's you love or hate it. Now we're gonna get into my favorite Paranormal Activity movie, and the best in the whole series, hands down, Paranormal Activity 2. I think this is the best in the franchise because it's still early enough on in the franchise where it has that unique quality of the original, but they kind of honed in the horror a little bit more for this one. There's more characters involved and a higher body count in this one. And I think this is a perfect prequel to the original. I love that they went with a prequel route and started, you know, playing around with the timeline a little bit with the second one. This is the first movie I ever saw in theaters that genuinely scared me. I've mentioned that multiple times that this movie was horrifying when I first saw it in theaters. And it was the first one that's done that. And obviously there's been movies since, but it's really rare as an avid horror fan to be scared in a theater. This has my favorite jump scare of any movie, and you guys know that I normally hate jump scares because they're used really poorly. This has the best one I have ever seen. It is the scene where she is sitting in the kitchen during the daytime. You know what I'm talking about, drinking her tea. Why did my voice just do that? And you know, the cabinets. The cabinets, that's all I'm gonna say. I just think that was so smart because we are so used to, with this franchise, looking and like staring at every little thing, trying to see movement in any way, and then they just come at you with all of it and you're so taken aback. That's why it was so horrifying in the theater. And then rewatching that jump scare is still effective. I don't jump anymore, obviously, because I'm expecting it, but it's still such a good scene. Her reaction after, the acting in general in this movie, it was just incredible. This had the perfect amount of characters to care about. Sometimes they overload it with characters and you don't know the relationships or they don't explain people. This one, you knew who everyone was. It was enough to care about. And they turned up the horror in this while still keeping it very, very simple of a movie, much like the original. So there you have my ranking of the Paranormal Activity movies. I know you disagree with me. Unless this is your perfect ranking too, let me know. I would love to know that I'm not alone with this one. But let me know your ranking in the comments. Like I said, if you disagree with this, maybe you should go check out Emma's video to see if you agree more with her ranking. I'm very excited to watch her video personally and see her rankings and her reasons why they're ranked that way. I'm very, very curious. I love hearing about people's opinions on each Paranormal Activity movie. So yeah, check out her video down below. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will talk to you soon. Bye.